Hustle.
Hi, everyone. I'm Roger Sanchez. Welcome to The Hustle, where we sit down with groundbreaking and influential people in media, sports, music, and culture and talk about the business side of life, their hustle. We're in London today, and it's my great pleasure to sit down with one of my personal friends, who's actually the founder of Defected Records, which is one of the most influential house music labels and clubbing brands of the 21st century. My main man, Mr. Simon Dunmore. How you doing, brother?
I'm good, Roger. How are you?
So good to see you, my man. Thanks for taking the time out. I know you've got a lot going on, and we got some ground to cover.
Indeed, it's been a busy year for us both.
Man. Well, I'll tell you what, Simon, let's start off with giving people who may not know you a bit of your origin story. Go back to the beginning, especially like right around the time when I met you for the very first time, but maybe a little bit further back than that.
So, way back in the day.
Who's Simon Dunmore?
Way back in the day, I was a soul collector. I used to collect rare and modern soul. I used to play records on the modern soul scene, and then that kind of developed into soul, rare groove, some jazz. And then kind of what happened was 1987, 1988, the house scene came in and shook things up quite considerably. So I ended up getting a job through, in kind of like a roundabout way.
You were working at a record store around
Yeah, I worked in a record store.
Which one was it again?
It was called Record and Disco Centre in Rayners Lane.
Yes.
And the whole point of working in a record store was just to get closer to the music, to get, as the records were coming in from the import vans, fresh from America and whatever, you would be the first person to get that elusive promo, or the guys from the companies in the UK would come in and give you upfront stuff or ask you advice on a record that was coming out and try and get you to plug it to DJs as they came in the store. So I got to meet some people in the music industry, and eventually I got a job doing club promotions at a label called Cool Tempo Records.
That's when I met you.
That's when I met you, because the story goes, which is actually true, was that I woke up one night, just in the middle of the night, randomly, couldn't go to sleep, and I put the radio on, and you were doing a mix for Kiss FM, and you were playing some stuff, and I'm in the music business.
Yes.
I've worked, I DJ, I work at a record label, I'm buying music all the time, and you were just playing banger after banger. I didn't know any of the records you were playing. It was all upfront pressure, and so I ended up recording it. And I was going to find out who you were, because I had no clue who you were.
Some young new kid from New York.
Yeah. And the very next day, a good friend of ours who's no longer with us, unfortunately, phoned me up and he said, "Hi, I'm Mark Sandrups. I'm managing Roger Sanchez. I'd love to come in for a meeting." I was just like, that's really weird. I was trying to track Roger down, so come on in.
I was actually about to send the bloodhounds out.
Exactly that. So I was doing club promotions for Cool Tempo Records. I started commissioning remixes. That eventually led to me having an A&R position.
Yeah, you signed some big records for here, right? Like, I think you signed Everyday People from
Arrested Development
out here, right?
We A&R'd and promoted Adiva, Gangstar, Kenny Thomas, Arrested Development. We did remixes for Debbie Harry, for all sorts of the pop side of the label, and
you kept me pretty busy with some of those remixes.
You busy.
Too.
Juliet Roberts, I remember doing Free Love and Caught in the Middle.
Yes.
And anyway, so obviously we started to have some success, and then I was offered a position at AM/PM Records.
Yeah.
Where I signed Alternate A Free, Moose T. Horny, worked with the Sounds of Blackness, Janet Jackson, Barry White, all sorts of
some serious
incredible
talent,
people.
Man,
and then in 1988, I left. I was
said you had enough, huh?
I just working for a major is good up until a point.
Yeah.
I mean, the salary's good, the perks are good, but it's never your own thing.
Let me ask you a question about that. You, I think, from the very beginning, that when I met you, you kind of always had this air about you, this kind of vibe that you were going to be meant to do something on your own that was greater than kind of like the sum of the parts. And I kind of had that vibe. I'm like, I'm going to pay attention to this guy because it looks like he's got an idea of where he wants to go, even if he hasn't kind of like sussed out the exact way to get there yet. Was that always the case? Like even during those times of you being the A&R for Cool Tempo and for AM/PM?
You know what? I never dreamed at the time that I would own my own label and it would have 20 years of existence, and we as an independent we'd have 2 number-1 records in the UK, and that was never on the agenda. It was just
was it kind of sitting in the back of your head?
Well,
though?
maybe subconsciously. It was all about progression. It was just like, okay, what can I do? DJing, working in a record store, working at a record label, signing records. 100%. But a lot of major labels, they sign music because they need to make money. It's not about integrity. It's not about consistency. It's about
the numbers
and the financial return. Whereas the great dance labels in the world, it's all about consistency. It's all about having a consistent following, and the DJs, having that reputation that a DJ will buy and play your record almost without hearing it.
Yeah.
Strictly Rhythm, which is the first record label that I became acquainted with the Love Dancing record, had that reputation, that a record would come in on a Friday or a Saturday, you go to the import store and you go, what's new on Strictly?
What's the new Strictly record? Yep.
So
how does it feel now, knowing that that's the people's questions on their lips? What's the new Defected Records? What's the new DFTD record? How does that feel?
I mean, it feels good, but the thing that I believe that's given us the longevity is the fact that I try to stay close to the source. So I'm the wrong side of 55 now ish, but I still try to make the effort to go to a club. I see what's going on. I see what the reactions. I know what I like. I see the reaction. I know what our audience likes. I see the kind of records that DJs are playing. So it just gives me an insight.
And you're very personally involved, and I know this from a personal perspective and standpoint. You're very personally involved with, I think, pretty much almost every label, every track that comes across your label. You have some sort of fingerprint on it. You've got a vibe. You sit down, you A&R almost pretty much everything. So for me, I've always seen you as very personally invested in not just the overall business, but really down to the details of the music.
I think if you look at most of the big companies in the world now, and I'm not comparing myself in any way to or defected to Apple and Steve Jobs, but normally there is one person at the top.
The mentality's there, though.
Which has, their DNA runs right the way through the company.
That's a good one. I like that.
And that
their DNA.
Yeah, it gives them the consistency. So, what I feel is, I don't know how big our audience is, but I believe there's enough people around the world who share my taste in music.
I think you're kind of getting a bit more of a clearer picture of how big your audience is.
So it's a good. Well, we can talk about why it's a good moment in time in a minute, but as long as there is an audience and you keep your consistency high. I mean, if my taste became irrelevant or bad or whatever, then everything would just fail. Yeah. It's music first. Music is the catalyst for everything, which is why it's important to go out. So even if my ears are failing me, then I listen to the tastemakers. People like yourself. I go and see DJs, Kenny, Louis, the new kids on the block that are coming through and whatever, and it gives me a sense of whether what I'm feeling is still relevant. So I listen. That's really important. It gives me that indication and endorsement that we're still on track. But the audience ebbs and flows. House music comes and goes out of fashion. But
it always comes back in cycle. You know what it is, Simon? Even more than just house music, it's just music.
Yeah, good music.
If you look at the classic major label owners, like the big guys, Ahmad Ertegun, Clive Davis, even into their twilight years, man, these guys were like just embedded in music. And it's funny because, all jokes aside with elder statesmen of house and all that other nonsense, the reality is good taste in music is timeless. There's tons of kind of like things that come and go, fads and so on and so forth. But the reality is when you root yourself in good music, that's timeless. That always keeps going.
Understood. And I mean, the thing that's changed I believe, is obviously technology, social media, connectivity with your community. So for the first time ever, you know, to find out what a new record was coming out by a label, back in the day you'd have to go to a store. You'd have to wait for a radio ad, you'd have to wait for a magazine. Now it's on Instagram, it's on Facebook, instantly. It's on Twitter. So if your audience is interested, they find out immediately. The costs are relatively non-existent. So.
And to that point, what's interesting is the music business itself has changed. And I remember back in the day, it was all about selling 12 inches, 7 inches. And, you know, there was really a lot of real revenue for labels, even at the independent level, you know, to sell music. Now, how have you found the changes with the way the music business is nowadays, especially with social media, the fact that very few people actually buy, you know, any sort of singles? I mean, there's still that kind of like resurgence of vinyl that's come back with a bit of nostalgia with certain things. And I think kind of always like the techno and the kind of really specialist end, still you can sell a couple of pieces of vinyl, but the actual consumption, the business of music, how are you finding operating in that world today as compared to when you first started the label?
There's been a huge transition, and people don't buy music now. What they do is they buy the right to listen to music.
Yes.
So, you know, when you do your agreement with Spotify or Apple Music or whatever your preferences and how you wish to stream records, you're not actually buying ownership of a record.
Yeah.
You're just buying the license or the right to listen to music whenever you want to, however many times you wish to, etc. Initially, the industry was pretty horrified by the return that they saw from streaming, because the volume in the market, the number of subscribers and people that were opting in to pay for that right to listen was very low. Now it's growing at a very, very quick rate. So the return is increasing, and the consumption of music is at an all-time high, because you know,
it's everywhere.
Yeah, in a boutique, in a gym, in a restaurant, you know, you watch people on the train, on the plane, they've all got their earbuds in, they're all listening to music, etc. So every time there's a play, you clock up a little bit of money, and the accumulation of that becomes significant after a while. It's all about volume, and you know, back in the day, I might have bought a CD. If I loved a record, I may have played it.
What, the album?
Yeah, I know. You may have played a record 30, 50, 100 times. You know, you may have burnt it, ripped it to your friends, made a cassette or whatever. They may have played it 50, 100 times. Then they may have given it to their friends, etc. So one purchase may have clocked up 500 plays, 600 plays.
You just wouldn't have been able to track it then.
You can't track it. Now you track it, and now you get paid for every play. So, you know, the economics probably are the same. Just the mechanism is completely different.
You know what I find? I find that record labels now, it's almost as if the labels have become the DJ/taste maker. So what's interesting in the new model with streaming, and it's great that you put a highlight on it, with Spotify and with all these different services, what I've noticed personally is who I listen to, and I just kind of, when I really want to get an analysis of what everybody else is doing, I just look at my own habits. And what I see is that you go to people's playlists, you go to curated playlists. So I think what's happened, and this is where I think you really cracked it kind of early on, is Defected became a brand for a sound. And what happens is people will always gravitate towards the brand they know, you know, Nike, Adidas, Hermes, whatever have you. In music, it's the same thing. And I think you've done a great job at creating brand Defected and then its subsidiaries like Glitterbox, DFTD, and the associated labels, basically as the tastemaker and for that sound. And that's, to me, what has really bridged the gap between Defected, the label, and Defected, the brand and the global empire that I'm kind of seeing right now. So how have you navigated this transition from being A&R, label owner to basically, and DJ, to now running global brands and clubs, festivals? You know, I've been playing for you years ago and then recently back again playing in Glitterbox in Ibiza, the Croatia Defected Festival. Oh, you got a sold out New Year's Eve and all these different events. How has that transition affected you? Like, how have you taken it in and really made it work for you?
Well, the first thing that happened was radio in the UK. I mean, we're a UK label. I mean, obviously you've got listeners all over the world, but in the UK, it was very unique in the UK because mainstream radio would support dance records. Yeah. They would play house records.
UK
like back in the day,
kind of unique for that.
Yeah, so back in the day, the Lacey Hideaway would get A-listed on Radio 1 and get national playlists, etc. And all of these records would come from the underground and get exposure. Mm-hmm. And then what happened with the commercialization of radio and advertising coming into play,
big bucks.
All of the dance stations adopted a pop format.
Yeah.
And the radio stations stopped playing dance records. So we were like, this is going to be pretty difficult for us, We're not getting the exposure that we needed to. So our solution was to do events around initially the UK and tour like a band would tour.
Right.
So we had to go to our audience because it was the only way our audience was going to hear what we were going to.
So you transitioned from a label mentality to almost like a promoter band mentality.
To an artist mentality. Yeah, for sure, because we had to promote what we did. So, and it's, we needed to be in the epicenter of dance activity, so Miami parties, Ibiza parties, because that's where our audience, frequented. Ibiza all summer. Obviously, we're based in London. There's a vibrant scene in London. Miami for the Winter Music Conference, etc. So wherever there was dance music, we needed to be visible. Mm-hmm. So we made an effort to be there, and it just kind of grew from there. So, but what happens is, when you've been around for a while, people get familiar and a little bit comfortable. And the dance music, everyone's obsessed with the new thing, the next thing that's coming in.
The hot new one.
Yeah, so, promoters are like, you've been around for a while, you're not as shiny and new and whatever you used to be.
There's this new penny that just turned up and we think he's going to be hot because it makes us look cooler, like we know what's going on.
So we found our bookings were declining because everyone wanted to book what the new kid on the block was maybe interested in. So we knew we still had an audience. We knew that people still wanted to see us. So we're like, okay, don't book us. We'll just go do our own thing. We'll put our own festival on. We'll curate our own night in Ibiza. And, I had a conversation with a club that both you and I used to play at in Ibiza. Begins with P.
Yeah.
Maybe you can come to your own conclusions. And they
starts with P and ends with Acha.
But, I had a meeting at the end of a season when we had a really, really good season. And they just said, no one's interested in Defected anymore. Everyone just comes for the DJs. And so thank you very much. So they kind of moved us on. They booked all of our DJs. And so what we did was we did the club down the road.
Yep.
We did it every Tuesday night. And we had 2,000 people there. So we knew then, actually, it wasn't about people going to Pasha. People do go to Pasha.
Yeah.
Pasha's a great club, but we contributed to that, and equally, I believe. But because we did it at a club where very few people went, which was Boom, we knew that the value of our night
you brought to it
was 2,000 people. So that then gave us the confidence to promote our nights ourselves in Ibiza.
The door that closed in your face opened up a garage door, as far as I can see. Because here's what happens. It's interesting. And I find this parallel even within my own career. There have been a lot of times when no has been the catalyst for so much greater things that at the moment, you can only help but feel, disappointed and dejected. You just got turned down. What you don't realize is that, you can call it God, you can call it life. There's a path that you're meant to take. And sometimes the thing that you want is not the thing you need. And what's great about what happened to you, and I saw the evolution, was when that door was closed, it immediately forced you to have to go do it yourself. And it's funny, it's almost like what happened when you left AM/PM and started Defected to begin with. You started pretty much from ground zero and built it up. And I think that probably, and maybe you could tell me from your perspective, the doors closing forced you to think outside of what was your comfortable box, didn't it?
Well,
business-wise, in terms of doing the way clubs used to be run in terms of Ibiza. Like, a lot of people who may not know, usually what happens is clubs will buy it into a brand night or into a DJ that creates a brand night. What happens with something like Defected is that the creative impetus of it behind it is you. So if the club thinks I can go get the DJs cheaper, I don't really need this, that kind of put more of an onus on you to say, okay, I've got to do it myself. I mean, do it better.
For sure. I mean, I think I do one, if I was put on earth to do one thing, I was put on earth to promote dance music. I tried to produce, I like to DJ. I don't consider myself, like, there are people that DJ far better than I am.
But you throw down, Simon. I've been in the booth with you. I've actually been impressed, man. And you know me, I'm a hard person to impress.
No, for sure. But I think I hear records, I can promote records, I've got, I can market records, and that's what I do. If it all fell apart, it would be really hard for me. I couldn't become a plumber or a taxi driver. Or, I just could not find a new career. So when the challenge is there to reinvent yourself or do something new, your survival instinct really kicks in. And sometimes that's when you're most creative. I agree. You're fighting. So, and then you come out and you come out fighting and you come out hard because you're fighting for your future. You're fighting for your survival, especially
you're fighting for what you love.
If you have a family, even more so.
Oh yeah.
So
motivating factors.
So those challenges are, it's just like we've been there with many people. We find people when hardly anybody's known them.
Yep.
They're at the very beginning of their career. We promote them really hard. They become really successful, and then they leave. This cycle happens again and again. And when they leave, it's quite hard to come to terms with sometimes. Yeah. But what it does...
It's like children.
It makes you go back and find the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And that keeps you fresh, that keeps you hungry, that keeps you invigorated in business, and it gives you drive. And it's like, not only do you want to promote the new guy because you really like what he's doing and you want him to succeed and you want to do well, you want to show the guy that's just left and you want to give him a better competition. So there's multiple motivations, but it's just like it is like that. When somebody says no or someone says you can't do it, if you're that inclined, you want to just demonstrate that they're wrong.
Speaking of that, what I found really interesting was, while you were doing Defected Records in Ibiza, this little other night just kind of started popping up that I kind of, in the beginning, wasn't too aware of. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, that's Simon. Talk to us about Glitterbox. How did that come about? Because I got to tell you, from being one of the residents for you the past couple of years, I've seen that night just absolutely dominate. And it was just a little idea of something that it looks like there was a gap in the market. And when everybody was telling you, nobody listens to that, you were pretty convinced and pretty fervent about pushing that Glitterbox idea forward, weren't you?
There was a little bit of luck involved, as there normally is. Basically, we were promoting a night at Boom, which I mentioned earlier. It was going exceptionally well. The rest of the nights at the club weren't doing well, and the owner asked me to promote a second night, and I said I can't promote a second house night because it would cannibalise what we're doing at Defected. But I have an idea. There's an audience coming to Ibiza. It's a little bit people coming back from a nostalgic reason to reminisce. They want to listen to the records that they listened to in the 1990s, early 2000s, the anthems from back in the day.
And no one's playing right now.
Yeah, and to bring some flamboyance back into clubbing because everything got really serious. People were wearing black. It was dark.
Everything just went black.
It went very, very serious. And clubbing is about
any color as long as it's black.
Yeah,
I'm guilty of that myself.
But
I had blue now, and it's a little bit, and occasionally a flash of red.
You got some white going on there,
a little white there.
It just the character. I remember going to Ibiza when I first went in 1986 to 1988.
Those amazing years.
And I could remember character, like very, just like people that were extreme in their fashion or their sexuality or whatever, and that made a huge impression on me.
It was going out to an experience. You actually went out and remembered, some people remembered, an aspect of the night that was magical. Yeah. That has been missing. That had been missing for the night.
A great record, for the night, and etc. So we just bought a little bit of that back to the island, and it clearly really resonated. So, but the thing about it was we wanted it to be so. For the first 2 years, we never did a Glitterbox party outside of Ibiza because we wanted people it to be an occasion. You had to travel to get there, and if you travelled there, you had a great time, and you went back, you told your friends. Obviously, you tell your friends on social media now, so it has a big reach. It just grew very organically. It's continuing to grow at a rate, and so we were lucky because we managed to curate a night at the brand new club on the island called High, formerly Space. They did an amazing job. They invested in an incredible amount of money.
Transition from Space, man. There was so many memories in Space, but what they did with what Space turned into as High, it just kind of felt right for Glitterbox to me when I first played it.
Yeah, but it's because if you've been going to Ibiza for 10 years or 15 years, you've done Pasha, you've done Amnesia, you've done DC-10 and whatever, you want to go to the new hotspot. High is the new hotspot.
It is.
It's the go-to club on the island. And we curate Friday nights there. Friday nights is a big night on the island. And I think we were a popular party, and the two just really kind of like elevated each other to the point where 6,500 people at the closing for a night playing classics.
I know. What's amazing to me also, just kind of putting the spotlight on Ibiza, is the fact that not only did you have Glitterbox every Friday in Ibiza at High, which was between 5,000 and 6,000 people, you are also running successfully Defected in San Antonio at Eden, which was 3,000 plus people. So add to that the Defected Croatia parties, the Glitterbox tours, and I played at a few of them. I was just going, yo, when is Simon actually getting any sleep? How have you managed to find the balance to pick the team? Because one thing I do know is once you start getting out of a very core environment and you really start spreading your wings and you really start branching out into all of these different events and at the same time running the label, so on and so forth, you really need to have a very strong and closely knit team so that you can communicate with them. How have you gone about choosing your team?
I think that, employing staff and employing people that understand you and connect with you and that are driven and share your vision is difficult, and over the years, people have come and they've contributed to the label, and then sometimes they've gone off and do their own thing because they're ambitious and they're and they want to they see that you own your own business and they see the benefits of that.
They always think they could do it better, don't they?
They do, and some people have gone on to do really well, and that only reflects on me, I believe. If they've worked for my company and they then become successful, I think that's testimony to the fact that we give them a good education, and we like to make our business a place for people to learn, so they can meet other people, they can learn good practices, and they can learn. We make mistakes, we learn from our mistakes, and they can learn, equally on our dollar sometimes.
Have there been any really major mistakes that you've run across in your career, especially recently within the last few years with the Defected Glitterbox situation? Have you kind of hit a wall where you've just gone, Jesus? Or as the Irish say, Jesus.
No, not recently. The challenge we had, like when the year, and I can't remember the exact year, say 2011, where we sold CDs, mainly CDs, and the odd bit of vinyl. And, our clients were the places we sold our records to were Virgin, HMV, Tower,
all of them gone.
Our Price,
decimated.
All of them went out of business.
It was like dominoes, one right after the other.
So one, not only did they go out of business owing us money, so we had to ride that out, but two, we had no market anymore. So we had to reinvent ourselves. So, obviously iTunes was coming to the fore, and we had a very strong digital strategy promotion-wise and to grow our community. So there's a blogger in the music business called Seth Godin, or Seth Godin, and I think it was in 2009, he wrote a blog saying that the future of the music industry was about creating communities and then selling whatever you wish to sell, an event, or your music to the community that you create.
Absolutely.
I actually wasn't aware of him saying this until a couple of years later, but subconsciously that's what we did. We made sure that musically we had consistency. So if you were into house music or you were into what people did at Defected, the next record you're likely to carry on liking. And then if you treat your fans well, they will tell their friends, and their friends then become fans.
Absolutely.
And then their friends then become fans, and that's how you grow your audience, and that's how you grow your community.
It's very viral, and it's interesting because I've seen how well you've executed the social media strategy, the marketing, the brand building, and I think it's interesting because I talk about this a lot with whenever I do certain webinars and I talk to people, how I've really become focused very much on the social media community aspect of what we do to be able to really reach our fans and grow our business, but more importantly, to just connect with people. And I think you've done a very, very good job on that. And how, for me, I'm curious as to how has that impacted your overall bottom line for your business, the redeployment of your strategy. How have you changed from the way you use your practices of how you used to promote and market your music and build your community to how you're doing it now?
So the first thing is I watched, there was a documentary on the BBC 2 months ago called Can You Feel It? I think it's called Can You Feel It? Anyway, there was
I saw that one, yeah.
They interviewed Francois Kevorkian, and he said, dance music is the most social form of music out there. It's, every weekend all over the world since, before I was born, people get together to meet their friends or try and, cop off with the opposite sex or whatever your taste may be, normally around dance music. And he said if you was an anthropologist and you went back 5,000 years, cavemen would get together around a fire and bang the drums. So the fire is a strobe light and people are getting together and they're dancing to a 4/4 beat or however the log was banged in that time. So I think it's hardwired into human psyche, dancing, meeting people. It's just what we do. It's what it's what we put on earth to do. So. And with dance music being the most social form of music and social media exploding, they've exploded in tandem. The emergence of superstar DJs and the popularity of festivals and huge audiences at dance events is absolutely, if you track it, I believe it's in tandem and parallel to social media. So instead of advertising in publications, DJ magazine, Mix Mag, we still do advertising as a magazine, but probably less than what we used to. Instead of taking adverts on Kiss FM, instead of doing posters on street walls, etc., flyers, etc., we now employ social media people, and that's our marketing. So we spend our money, but we spend it in a different way.
It's where the attention is. And
the great thing about social media, it's global. It's 24/7. It can be if you
it's very direct. To your consumer, very direct to your community, which is what I really like about it.
100%. And what the one thing that you have to manage is your content. The content needs to be great because otherwise you'll lose people, and your tone needs to be great. And that is, you can't dictate to people. It's best if you can inform people and then they make their own choice.
Listen to people.
Yeah, and listen to people.
Do you interact a lot personally? I know that your team does, but just you personally, because it's funny, I always check out people's social media accounts, their Instagram and Twitter, and just to kind of see how, different artists and different people are interacting with their audience. And I've seen you respond to your fans. Do you find that to be an important part of your work week, just kind of really connecting with your community?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's people contact you in every way possible. I mean, I'm actually not on Facebook. I think it would be a bridge way too far for me. It's just like I've never been on there, but I'm on Twitter, which works very well for me, and I'm on Instagram, which works really well for me. And people direct message you, so you can't answer everybody, but Some of my staff, they try to answer on my behalf if it's a straightforward request. And if it's something personal, then they'll say, I can't answer this. Can you tell me what to say? Or I'll go on and do it personally. It's a lot to manage, as you well know. You know, it's just like...
I spend a disproportionate amount of time literally just liking people's comments and answering them. But what I find is the ROI on that one is amazing.
And you know, it's just like making time for people, actually making time for everyone, making time for the people you work with, the people that work for you, for your fans, just having that, you know, you see the DJs that someone asks for a photograph and they shun someone and they've just lost the fan. That just makes no sense to me whatsoever. Just have time. These people are the people that paid €50 to get in, maybe bought a T-shirt, maybe been your fan for 15 years, and don't disappoint them.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's you have to make time. And I mean, you know, if you'd have said to me 25 years ago, people would stop me in the club and say, "Can I have my photograph taken?" You're like, yeah, but it's the moment it stops, then you know that you got a problem.
Well, you know what's interesting is because of social media, people are actually paying attention to who is driving things. You know, I look at guys like Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V, and basically entrepreneurs are becoming new social media stars now. So it isn't so far removed now that people know, okay, this particular brand, great when you have a DJ that's associated with it, but people associate you very, very closely with Defected. Not only do you play the events, but they understand where the core, where the DNA, as you said before, is in the company. Now, you've picked some pretty big successes. You know, in the last couple of years, you've had You've had Camel Fat, which has been massive. You've had records from a ton of people. You were behind my very first #1 in the UK with Another Chance. And what I've always noticed throughout all of it is that there's always been this thread running through of just real soul in the music, that connection. This to me runs through whenever I look at what you're doing with Defected, with Glitterbox, and pretty much everything that you're doing. I always see that thread running through. Where do you see that thread leading to in the next 5-10 years?
I mean, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Music is very personal to people. It's emotional for people. People are really attached to records. You know, it's just like they fall in love to it. They have the best times. You know, they remember sad times by it, and that's never ever going to change. And the sad thing about the transitions that music went through was it artists lost confidence about going into the studio because they didn't feel there was the return that was going to be there for them for their creativity. And I think what's happening now with Spotify and Apple Music and the fact that people are seeing a return, hopefully it will give the people, the producers, the confidence to work with other musicians and collaborate with singers and up their game and make better records and not think that they just need to make a record on their laptop. Because records are, you know, when you make a record off your laptop, sure, it can sound great in a club, but sometimes it's limited by that. And so I think that there's a return to people appreciating the value of music, and that will be an amazing thing for every genre of music, not just dance records. But my thing in dance music is I'm an old soul boy. I grew up in an era where literally on the way here I was listening to a Bobby Womack record on repeat, track called Give It Up, and I played it and then I played it again, and I was just that's where I come from. So that's how I like my dance music. If I'd have grown up in a different era, maybe I'd like techno because I don't know what I was listening to, but soul is my thing. So I like soul within my house music and, you know, within disco, etc. And that's the consistency that you find within Defected and the associated labels that we have. So, and it's music first. Music drives everything.
Absolutely.
The reason that, you know, you have a great DJ career is because you made great records.
Thank you.
And sometimes people forget that. They make a great record, they go on the road, then they don't go back in the studio.
Yeah.
They make another great record, and just become even more popular because the scene needs to be nourished by great music.
I agree.
You know, you can't just keep taking the fees out of the scene and then just going, I don't need to do it
It's
anymore.
like pulling the oxygen out of a room.
For sure. Just put more oxygen in by making more great records and bring more people into the scene, and everybody will benefit.
You know what I see you doing? It's funny, when you talk about nurturing, I've also seen you on a more personal family side, you know, with your wife, Yaz, and your kids. How have you found the development of your legacy? Interestingly enough, as I'm seeing your kids grow, they're wonderful kids, by the way, and what I love about them is there's a genuineness that can only be taught by demonstration. So how are you finding the next generation of nourishment that you've done, and your balance with it as well? Because there's a lot of demands on you time-wise with this. And you and I had a conversation years ago where you told me what you thought about how you were managing your kind of work-life balance. Do you remember that conversation?
I don't. My there's a skew in my balance for sure.
I think there's a skew in everybody's balance.
I mean, I'm a provider. I'm the hunter, and I have to provide for my family, and I'm completely driven by that. And when you know, my legacy when I pass on will be, you know, the music that I've been associated with, and what I've done to provide for my family, you know, when I leave. So, you know, and it drives me really hard. I missed things. I've missed, you know, sometimes I've missed my kids' birthdays or a sports day or when they get their exam results or whatever, but I provide a really good, solid foundation for their life.
Not only that, I'm going to tell you something that you told me. You probably didn't remember it. You told me that you communicated with your wife, and that was the fact that she was the not only just understanding, but that support, whereas you guys had the balance of work is work, home is home. That carries through everything because there's a real foundation of soul there. And I think that is even more than maybe what you might realize part of your legacy. I mean, it's quite a difficult subject with the way that the world views things at this moment in time. But she was a very successful woman in her business. She gave that up to become the mother of my children. She wanted to be a mother. She gave up her career to bring up our children in the way that she wanted to bring them up, and that's an enormous sacrifice. And my contribution to that was to work as hard as I could, so that I could enable her to be the mother of our children. And I think that you said that, you know, our children are great children. That is testimony to the job that my wife has done into being a mother. Now, there's a lot of pressure on people in the world today. People aren't able to do what I was able to do and what my wife was able to do, what Yasmin was able to do. But and that's quite sad, really, because the pressure is for people to work as hard as they can to have this lifestyle that they see on social media. So that's the downside of social media as well. Everybody wants a fast car or an amazing holiday. Or they want things as opposed to, you know, and this is a big part of my thesis. I'm very fortunate to do what I love for a living, which I think you can agree with. Your timeline, just looking at it from a distance, reads as something that you've put a lot of love into, where you've loved the process, maybe even more so than the results. So I think people are so results driven that they see the cars and the life, the money, the girls, whatever have you, as a result, when the actuality is the process of getting there. That's really what I think is the reward and the result. Is that something that you that resonates with you?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, it's. I love what I do. Clearly, I love what I do. I'm fortunate in the same way as you are. But someone asked me the other day if I didn't work in the music industry, and I had a normal 9-to-5 job and whatever, what do they think I would do in the evenings? And I said, I'd go to my record room and listen to records and practice mixes, and so that would be my escape. That would be my release, and that's just what I do for my job. And so so the time and hours and effort are probably exactly the same. I just spend the entire time doing something that I'm very passionate about. And and I've been lucky. There's been times when we've needed something to just kick in to enable us to survive. We've been down to the last penny. You're thinking, Jesus, if something doesn't happen, I'm going to have to let staff go, or I'm going to have to find something else to do. And every time that's happened, we've had, another chance. Appropriately named record came along. And that actually was, the business was hugely successful. But what happens was, we were manufacturing records at such a rate, we were selling the records, but we were waiting 6 months to get paid.
That's right.
And the cash flow in the company was decimated by the fact that we were so successful at the front end, and then we had to wait 6 months to get the money.
Yeah.
And sometimes you speak to banks and they understand, and sometimes they're not so sympathetic.
The creative side is very difficult for like a banker to kind of quantify.
So we were. It was a huge bump for us. It's just like we had no money. Had no money to pay staff or bills, and people were banging our door because they see you having hits.
Yeah, they think you're rolling.
They don't care about your problems, but. We rode out that bump, and then the money started to come in, and then that gave us another lease of life until the next bump came along. And that, I think, now is given us a fortunate position as we have experience of hard times. We can read when they're coming, and we can manage our way through the hard times. And that just comes with 20 years of running a business. And I follow some business advisors on Twitter, and one, not always true, but one tweet I read the other day was, it takes 10 years to build a solid business with a reputation. I mean, things like Uber come along and destroy a comment like that. But genuinely,
well, no, even Uber, people don't see, and I think this is prevalent in almost any business with success. People don't see the backstory. Getting to where you are now, everybody thinks Defected, like the new generation will think Defected happened overnight. They don't see the last 10, 20 years that you've put in. So for me, if you were to look at somebody starting off, young Simon Dunmore, who you now have the benefit of looking back in time, and you needed to give him some advice, what would you tell him?
If someone was starting out, I would say, you've got to trust your gut instinct. It's like you'll read publications, you'll get advice from people, but what does your gut and what does your heart tell you? And because normally, if you understand what you're doing and you're passionate at what you're doing, your instinct is probably right. Every time I've gone against my instinct, I've regretted it most occasions. And, it's easier to live with yourself if you feel that you've made a decision that is true to what you believe in. And it's not always possible to do that. Sometimes people have to make decisions that go against that. But if you can just trust your instinct. And the other thing is just it doesn't cost anything to be polite, to be kind, to return people's phone calls, to have time for people. And, it's just like, make time for people, listen to people. The guy that actually is my managing director now and doing an amazing job, and you say that the last 2 or 3 years have been flying, but he called me up 4 years ago and he just said, I'm at the crossroads of my life. I just need some advice. Can I come in for a coffee? I just need 10 minutes of your time. He came in for 10 minutes. We ended up speaking for 3 hours. I offered him a job the next day. He started doing club promotions in the same way as I do club promotions. He's now the managing director. He's an unstoppable force. And that's just because I made time to speak to someone that I'd never even met before. It was a cold call. And, you travel. I meet some amazing people on the plane, in the airport, randomly in a club, in a bar, etc. And that grows your perception of so many things and your experience. And one of the amazing things about the industry and what I've done in my life is I've got to travel, and the experience of meeting different people, cultures, experience, etc., has been hugely beneficial to me on a personal level.
Simon Dunmore, thank you so much for taking time out of your extremely busy schedule to tell us a little bit about your hustle.
Thank you very much, Roger.
I'm looking forward to seeing you in the booth and on the dance floor very, very soon.
Cool. Thank you, and you, sir.
The Hustle.